Warning, I'm not doing a product review with this video, but an attempted autopsy of a missed revolution. If you're here for benchmarks and spec sheets, you're in the wrong place. But if you ever wondered why the tech in your pocket still feels a bit held back, let's talk. Honestly, I'm not in a great mood making this video. At first glance, it's just another MacBook, nothing special. But the more you think about it, the more it starts to feel like one of the biggest missed opportunities in Apple history. Because this thing quietly proves something Apple probably doesn't want you to notice. Your phone is ready to replace your computer. But instead of unlocking that feature, Apple just buried it inside another laptop. Yet somehow, everyone's still hyping about it, and they're calling it the MacBook Neo. Apple named this thing Neo, and for anyone who's seen The Matrix, the irony is hard to ignore. In the movie, Neo took the red pill. He chose to see reality for what it was, and in doing so, everything changed. But in this reality, our Neo took the blue pill. It woke up and settled for being just another MacBook. Apple was so close to shipping something truly revolutionary on March 11, 2026, but instead, they ship junk.
We just can't ship junk.
Of course, I'm not calling it junk in the sense of a laptop, as a piece of hardware is totally fine. But I'm genuinely frustrated by everyone focusing on the trivial things. The specs, the benchmarks, the 8GB of memory, the pricing, the display, the effing keyboard, and of course, joking about it running on a phone chip. A phone chip.
Are you getting it?
Because that phone chip is the only thing that actually matters. This machine reveals an uncomfortable truth Apple has been dancing around for years. Our smartphones are ready. They've been capable of running full desktop operating systems and professional workflows for a while now. When Steve Jobs first introduced the iPhone, he said it would run OS X.
iPhone runs OS 10.
People were thrilled. A real computer in your pocket. But that's not what we actually got. We got something simplified, a streamlined touch-friendly version of OS X, locked down inside a walled garden. Was this everything Steve got under his sleeves? Apparently not. But it wasn't necessary at his time, since there were still many missing pieces to the puzzle. For a long time, the limitation of making our smartphone the centerpiece of personal computing wasn't just the hardware, but also everything about it. Before the App Store, mobile software was chaos. You had Windows Mobile, Symbian, Java, Linux, Palm, BlackBerry, each with its own interface and their own ways of doing things. Keypads, QWERTY keyboards, styluses, D-pads, there wasn't any consistency nor standard. And the distribution was even worse. Finding and installing software reminds me of dealing with old DOS programs. Then Apple introduced the App Store, and almost overnight, everything changed. The number of apps on the iPhone exploded. Because for the first time, there was finally a place where these developers and users could meet with each other. The App Store solved one of the biggest missing pieces to enabling the iPhone to become something much more revolutionary. But still, it wasn't quite there yet, because there was actually
one more thing
to deal with: the hardware. So far, everything was still confined to that tiny little screen of an iPhone. Then Apple made it bigger with the iPad. Steve Jobs said the iPad was the original vision before the iPhone.
I actually started on the tablet first.
A device that could replace traditional PCs while still fitting in your hand. But without the iPhone and its ecosystem, it would have surely failed. So reasonably, it arrived later. The iPad was often joked about being an oversized iPod. The joke has some truth in it, as the iPad did just run on a beefier version of the iPhone chip and completely inherited the iOS along with all the apps made for iPhone, with everything enlarged of course. But the good thing was, most people back then didn't expect it to be a PC or laptop replacement yet. They just wanted something portable and good enough for media consumption and light work. something that works better than a netbook. So the iPad delivered just right and became a commercial success. But people's expectation won't stay the same forever, and Apple's decisions about future iPads clearly began to miss the mark for the next few years. So things started to drift. By 2015, the entire iPad lineup was losing traction after its peak from a year ago. Sales were plummeting, production slashed, and word on the street was that the iPad was on its way to becoming irrelevant. Apple tried to breathe life into it with new sizes and names, and while the iPad mini found a cult following, it still wasn't the cure. Then came what looked like a decent solution.
This is the iPad Pro.
The absolute beast that was always on a leash. It was marketed as a tool for professionals, bigger, faster, the Apple Pencil. It still ran on the lackluster iOS. Oversized icons, confusing gestures, locked system with limited folder access, proprietary port that can't connect to anything in the real world without a dongle. On paper, the iPad Pro seems capable of doing many things, but for most workflows that we're familiar with, using the iPad rather than a MacBook will almost certainly make everything feel constrained and awkward. Over the years, we saw the iPad Pro mature. USB-C, better styluses, promotion displays, and marginal improvements of the iPad OS. And to give credit where it's due, it was a brilliant move for Apple to eventually adopt the M-series chip for the iPad Pros. Yes, the ultimate powerhouse that was only found in the MacBook before. But even more so, it made the iPad Pro look like a lawnmower with a Ferrari engine inside. It will cut your grass faster than anything else on the block, but you're still just cutting grass. Anyway, our puzzle finally feels somewhat complete. The performance, the software, the architecture, even the price tag were all pointing the iPad Pro towards something else, a complete PC replacement. But from here, Apple refuses to budge anymore. For over 10 years since the release of the first iPad Pro, Apple has been reluctant to ship the most obvious upgrade to this machine, a real Mac OS, or at the very least, allow it to dual boot it. It's ironic a premium brand like Apple that usually prides itself on standing at the convergence of tech and art would allow this abominable software gap to exist for years. Even as perfectionist as a person like Steve Jobs was very open about it. Use Boot Camp and run whichever OS you like. But today's Apple won't even hint at a choice. Quoting, it's about user experience.
The iPad is the ultimate touch device. You can hold it in your hand.
Or is it? Think about this. If most people could actually run macOS from their iPhone, who would spend another $2,000 on a separate laptop and a tablet? And from here, we're beginning to see through the matrix. And at this point, there's no way to frame it as a coincidence. For over a decade, we've been asking for desktop-class experience on mobile devices, which used to be hindered by the hardware, software, or even the workflow, but not anymore. And on March 11, 2026, Apple could no longer hide this reality. The A-series chip on your iPhone is no different than the M-series chip found on a MacBook, and both can run full macOS perfectly well. The MacBook Neo is a confession. It basically screams for Apple, your phone from last year is already powerful enough to run full macOS and professional software, but we'd rather sell just another MacBook instead. That's what makes this so frustrating. This didn't have to be a new product at all. It could have been a new feature, a software update. The revolution was right there for the taking. Put macOS on the iPhone or iPad, create a desktop mode, charge $500 for a fancy-looking dock if you have to, and boom, a complete personal computer right in your pocket. You'll still be using the iOS for the touch experience, but the moment you dock it into the monitor and keyboard, a full desktop environment appears. Apple didn't miss this opportunity. They're choosing not to seize it. And there's definitely no reason to ground this decision entirely on protecting the user experience. As a matter of fact, the iPad OS has been doing nothing but borrowing features from the Mac OS over the past 2 years.
Right.
It was a menu bar. There was nothing about that was in conflict with being an iPad.
And the bitter truth is, this idea isn't even new. Microsoft, Google, Samsung, Motorola, they've all tried to turn a phone into a desktop, but all failed, because there was always a missing piece to their puzzle. It's either the hardware wasn't efficient enough, or the app ecosystem wasn't there. Windows runs like shit on ARM, and x86 runs like shit on battery. But today, only Apple possesses the most complete puzzle in the whole tech world. It's got the silicon, the OS, the apps, and the prestige. But somehow, they just refuse to put them together. And it's safe to say the reason lies way beyond a technological one. Looking back, Steve Jobs willingly allowed the iPhone to cannibalize his own revolutionary iPod to move our world forward. Today's Apple is much too worried about their bottom line and protecting their ecosystem of fragmented products. In an alternate timeline, March 11, 2026 could have been the moment when everything changed. Imagine a world where entire digital life could finally revolve around one device. You walk into a room, connected to a screen, maybe even wirelessly via a perfected version of a sidecar, and you're at work. That future should have been easily within reach, but instead, we got a Chromebook killer, a budget MacBook added to an already bloated lineup. And maybe the real problem isn't that the technology isn't ready, but we've just stopped anticipating. We've become so conditioned into buying the same technology over and over again, just in different boxes, that we don't feel the need to think different anymore. At this point, I'm not even sure if it's Apple holding back that future or us. Anyway, that's just my 2 cents. Feel free to agree or disagree in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one.